executive session, and now we're back. You've missed our pledge of allegiance. And we are moving on to consent agenda. So there's a bunch here, a bunch of warrants from the summer, 2 sessions of school committee minutes. Thank you, Kathy. Some budget updates. Oh, I don't have the update. Status of general funds. Our operating protocols, which we can talk about a little bit in the retreat recap, but those came up during the retreat, and the discussion was that those are working well for us and to roll them over again. So we'll all sign those. The Massachusetts Controlled Substance Registration, also an acknowledgement of review and continued non-disclosure of school committee executive session minutes dated June 5th, 2023 under the open meeting law. And we are very excited to see on here an employment agreement between Westford School Committee and Westford Education Association's Units A and C for the next 3 years. That was a long time coming, and thank you to administration and to the bargaining subcommittee that worked hard on those. And there's also an MOU with the food service workers for fiscal year 24. So with those.
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. And we have 2 members remote today.
Yep, they're on Zoom.
Are they on panelists?
Yep.
Okay, great. So we'll be doing votes roll call. So that is Bill,
Aye.
Sean,
Aye.
Mari.
Aye.
Thank you. Catherine.
Aye.
Thank you. And Chris.
Aye.
And I'm an aye. Those are all approved. Thank you. Next, we have public comment. The school committee welcomes community members to attend meetings and speak on matters within its purview to promote equitable opportunities to be heard. Speakers will be limited to 2 minutes in their comments. The overall duration of the public comment period will be predetermined on the meeting agenda, but may be extended at the discretion of the chair. If you are in the room, please come to the microphone and introduce yourself and your address. And if you are on Zoom, you can raise your hand. And we will unmute you, and you can share your thoughts. Just a reminder that as part of our operating protocols for the last 2-3 years, our public comment process is just one way, not a dialogue. There won't be responses, but we do listen and consider what you have shared after.
Okay. I'll bring in our guest.
Oh, somebody online.
Yep.
Looks like we've got one hand.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
We can, yep.
Yeah.
Okay, it's Diane Wood, 122 Depot. I can't tell who is in the room, so this is probably more directed at Dr. Chu. I'm not sure if he had a chance to see the email that I did send out yesterday and call his attention as well as school committee to the email I sent regarding including information about the firearms bylaw in the WPS billboard. So that's my request. There are a number of events of various different topics that are included in that billboard. And as a PSA announcement in that billboard, it would be beneficial to the entire WPS community and support the whole communication plan that I hope Dr. Chu supports. So just wanted to call that to Dr. Chu's attention. Not sure if he's even in the room, I can't see, but I wanted to put that on the table. And I'm not going to stay on the call, but just wanted to call it to everybody's attention. And thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Anyone else with raised hands? Okay, just give that one more minute. We are a little ahead of schedule. Nobody else? Great, okay. So next up we have recognition.
We do. We have a recognition for 2 people who were not able to join us tonight. So my suggestion is as it is kind of the first day back, meetings galore.
Yeah.
One of those individuals, Mr. Toomey led his first massive staff meeting at Westford Academy today as the building principal, and I know there was a lot of work being done, and I know Mr. Coughlin has been meeting with people all day long, and so I think we'll find maybe a different day to bring them back.
Yep.
Which would be great.
I think that's helpful because anyone watching gets to see their faces.
Yeah.
The committee had a chance to meet with Mr. Coughlin at our retreat, but obviously that meeting was not televised, so it is nice to just have them at an upcoming one, dependent on their schedule, of course. Okay. Informational updates. So we'll get started with you.
Sure. So the first thing was that, today was the first big kickoff day. It was a little different because we did flip the schedule. We typically meet with the entire district first thing in the morning, and this year we decided to flip the schedule so that WEA had an opportunity to discuss updates and to really discuss this contract, the updated information with their membership, and that they could actually take their vote before starting the school year rather than waiting to do it after school. And so that then led to building-based meetings, and then everybody joined us at WA for our district-wide meeting at 1:30. And I actually got some interesting feedback from people that flipping it around on some levels, it was nice because starting in the buildings actually allowed maybe some new staff to connect with somebody that they might not know yet. It allowed teachers to see each other who haven't seen each other, whereas normally that takes place, at WA or some of the, darker years on Zoom. But the idea being that it was an interesting thing, and I was like, oh, well, that might be something to consider. It has other implications if we were to do that, so I'm going to kind of get some feedback from everybody to find out how they felt. It was great because, yes, we were able to start, I think, in a nice celebratory tone to get the school year started, and we were grateful to the work that both the negotiation teams have done to bring this contract to realization, I guess. And one of the things that I think is important that I wanted to make sure that we acknowledged was the fact that our Unit E does not have a settled contract, and so that's something that we're committed to continue working on. And so I wanted to make sure that all of our Unit E members heard that clearly today as well too. And it started with the band. We did that last year. We brought the band out first, and the band came out and they played, and it was a studio, oh gosh, it's anime, and I can't remember
Ghibli.
Thank you. It was themes from Studio Ghibli, and it was great, and it was fantastic to interact with the band and see that, and it just reminded us of all of the wide variety of skills that our students have. But they've been practicing for the marching season, and so they're kind of ready for this, so we benefit from their ability to work with us. But that's kind of the big happenings. One of the things that I think is important for all of you to be aware of, and for folks at home to be aware of, is that with this new agreement, as part of the new contract, we are going to be adjusting the the family teacher conferences. And so we're going to be coming back to the school committee with an updated calendar. One of the things we do know is that we're no longer going to have the two interrupted days in November before Thanksgiving. So that Monday and Tuesday this year will be full days of school. The Wednesday will still be an early release day for the holiday weekend, but we won't be doing conferences at that time. What we're going to do is we're going to have conferences on 2 back-to-back early release days in December, and the conference time is going back to 15 minutes for elementary schools, which I know that was feedback that we heard from both families and from staff members, that reducing it to 10 minutes was not sufficient, so we're going to go back to the 15-minute window. Everything will stay the same at the middle schools. Those have traditionally been 10 minutes, and they'll continue to stay at 10 minutes. But we need to figure out what that looks like on the calendar, and so we'll be coming back to the committee with an updated calendar that will clearly need to be approved by you. So I anticipate we'll have that for the next meeting.
Great. Anything else?
I think that's it.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. School committee updates.
I have one.
Great.
So I've been sitting on, I need to check my crib sheet. I've been sitting on the MBTA Communities Multifamily Housing Advisory Committee, affectionately referred to as MCMAC.
Did you have a hand in that acronym?
I did not. I wish I had. I was so impressed.
Yeah.
So the quick rundown is that by state law, communities that have MBTA stations or adjoining communities are required to zone for a certain amount of multifamily housing in those communities to encourage the development of multifamily housing so that people can have access to MBTA and public transportation. We are an adjacent community, so we have to have a certain amount. We need a bylaw change by the end of 2024 in order to enshrine the fact that we are open to that. Doesn't mean we have to build those units, but we have to have zoned a certain part of the town as acceptable for multifamily housing up to a certain number, and it's based on your or the number of homes you have in your town. And so for us, we have to accommodate 924 multifamily housing units on at least 50 acres. It'll end up taking more than 50 acres just because when you look at water treatment and things like that, you'll need more real estate. So this committee is working to look at the bylaws and develop those at the upcoming town retreat, which is a week from Thursday, I think, on the 7th. We will have information, we'll have some tables, and we'll be doing some info sessions, some roundtable discussions. Because we want to hear from the community what sorts of things, I mean, as we're learning, this sounds like maybe like a dry zoning bylaw thing, but then it really is about the development of the town. Like when you look at where would we want this, and what does multifamily housing look like? It can look like kind of a big boxy apartment building, or it can look like townhouses, or it can look like mixed use where you have retail like interspersed with apartments or things like that. So we had a nice presentation from some consultants that showed some really interesting things that other towns have done to actually revitalize some areas of their towns in a really nice way, to give like there were some that gave a real town village center feel to areas that used to be like strip malls. You're like, oh, that's actually kind of interesting. So we encourage people to come out on the 7th and give their feedback on what they want things to look like going forward.
I have a quick follow-up question. Is the 924 units, is it possible to include existing
Yes,
units?
it can use existing,
Got it.
so the Bell properties on 110 and things like that.
As long as you put those in the new zone.
If we put those in the new zone,
Got it.
then those would count.
Okay. Any other updates from school committee members? No, okay, I had a couple. Well, you mentioned the retreat, so just a reminder to anyone watching that the town strategic retreat is next Thursday, September 7th from 5 to 8 p.m. at Kimball's. There is a registration link on the town website. The MCMAC committee and the budget task force will be giving presentations, as well as other committees and boards have tables around, and there is free dinner and free ice cream. So it's always I know it's kind of a tough weeknight timing, but if you're able to join us, please do. Another update I had was Brian Rourke reminded us that DESE, the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education, has sent out the Comprehensive Health and Physical Education Framework out for public comment, and that deadline was today but was extended to Thursday. And all that information is on the state website if anyone is interested in perusing those changes and giving feedback to the state.
It's good that they extended that deadline, because it was questionable as to why it was ending before school started, because they were looking for input from teachers as well, and like the idea being that some people might not have even gotten that information. So I think that's helpful.
Yeah, I think it said the website wasn't working over the weekend, but
Yeah.
for either way. And then we have a pretty strong precedent for not responding to public comment, so I was planning to share this either way, regardless, but just so everybody knows, at the select board meeting that we had with a joint session Which I can't even remember what the purpose of that was. Did we approve somebody?
Yeah, was that for,
A couple weeks ago, we had a joint
DI?
session.
no, that was earlier in the
Maybe.
summer.
No, that might have been it,
That
yeah.
was it.
A couple weeks ago, we had a joint session with Select Board, and there was a member of the public who publicly requested that the school committee take a stance on the firearms zoning bylaw that I'm sure most of you have heard about as a resident. And since it's not on the agenda, we won't be deliberating about that tonight, but I encourage you all individually to reach out to me and let me know if you feel like that should be included on an upcoming agenda at the will of the committee. Okay, student representatives, we don't have them yet.
Right. They haven't started yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, we're moving on to business for the financial review.
Can I just add one more thing
Yep.
as Jenny's getting set up? I'm sorry. If anybody's paying attention to this at this moment in time and you're thinking about the orientations for tomorrow, because we do have 6th grade and 9th grade orientation that's taking place tomorrow. The 6th grade at both middle schools they are following a half-day schedule, but the high school, the freshmen are not. They are following a full-day schedule. Our calendar referenced that they would both be half-days. At one point, it said TBD, and then it said that they were both, but I do know that the academy and the middle schools have been communicating that information. But that question came up to me today, and so I just wanted to, if there's anybody listening, I think that's kind of an important thing to remember, that full day for the freshmen, different activities, they're going to go to classes and then do some different things, half day for the 6th graders.
And transportation,
Transportation is, the buses will be running for both
Great.
groups.
okay.
So for those who have been in summer mode, you should expect to see yellow school buses out tomorrow. which
Good
is
point.
Nice,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So,
Yep.
Yep.
Return to fall.
yes.
That's right.
Yep.
Plan your commute accordingly.
Yes.
Great. So welcome Jenny, Director of School Finance, for the financial review.
Okay, good evening. Before we start the new school year, let's begin with the overview for last fiscal year. If anyone can help me to pull up the presentation so we can go from there, because we can see the data for our last quarter analysis.
Pull it up.
Are you able to do that? Yeah.
1 second. This one, right?
Yes, thank you. So tonight, on the first slide, I will provide you the general fund status snapshot. In fiscal year 23, we received annual town meeting appropriation for the total amount of $63,961,692, along with the additional special town meeting appropriation, $76,500. The total fiscal year 23's general funds appropriation was $64,038,192. By the end of fiscal year 23, all the general funds operating budget was depleted to zero. By the end of the year, we made a $200,000 transfer from our general fund to special education reserve fund with the approval by the school committee last semester by utilizing the remaining general funds operating budget. So this helps us to prepare and support the 14% increase for the special education private school tuition. Aside from that, we were able to prepay $260,000 towards a portion of fiscal year 24's out-of-district collective tuition. This is permitted by Mass General Law, Chapter 40, Section 4E. This will provide us a cushion in fiscal year 24's general funds operating budget to assist with the unsettled Unit E contract. So this funding is reserved here for this particular purpose. So next slide.
Can I
moving-
interrupt quickly just before you go to the next slide? Just, I think you're all aware of this, but in case anybody's watching this at a different time, everything that Jenny said at the beginning about FY23 with the FY23 special town meeting appropriation, that we considered all of that as we built our FY24 budget. right? So like when we go back and talk about this, someone might think that that was a change that then, but that final number, the $64,038,192 was the final number that we were already dealing with as we built our FY '24 budget. So, but now it's so far back in the past that someone might think that that's a change, but it's actually not. She's just done a very nice job spelling everything out for us.
Yeah, that's just our base for fiscal year 24's budget. Moving to this slides, you can see a summary for our balances for individual state function codes. In this chart, on the right bottom, you can see the available budget, $200,000. That's the amount we transfer from general fund to special education reserve fund. In town's combined balance sheet, you can see this money moving out of our school's budget. After we have the overview for this whole picture, let's go to next slide. We will talk about general fund's salaries. First, let me focus on non-facility department salary. Here is a recap for the large budget category expenditure listed here. The total non-facility department's budget was $53 million. The total expenditure was $52 million. So we ended up in the fiscal year 23 with a positive balance, $42,000. So I will discuss about a couple highlighted variants here, as you can see in the breakdown. The first category is teacher specialist and instructional coordinator. It revealed a $29,000 deficit for fiscal year 23 because we were required to hire a special education teacher in the middle of fiscal year 23. The second category is substitute. There is the remaining balance, $43,000, because that indicates we have a lower instance of fully paid leave of absence. That's an area really particularly challenging to project for the budget purpose, because that area covers on the family medical leave, on the health-related leave of absence. That's why we have some positive ending balance in this area. The third category is teacher assistant. For the teacher assistant, we maintain $57,000 positive balance by the end of fiscal year 23. Because these positions are assigned based on actual needs, because we know these areas experience lots of turnover, so these positions are adjusted based on adjusted through the attrition, retirement, and the turnover to align with the actual needs rather than the projected ones. The last category I'm going to talk about is guidance counselor, psychologist, and medical and health category. We ended up with $73,000 deficit because in fiscal year 23, we have one opening for guidance counselor that was not budgeted in fiscal year 23. But overall, our non-facilities department salary ended with a positive $42,000, which is good. So after the non-facility department salary, let's talk about the facility department salaries. For facility department, the entire custodian and maintenance salary, we budgeted a total $1,922,000. We spent $1,962,000, resulting a negative balance for $39,000. The significant areas of underfunded salaries, you can see the numbers in red. They are custodian substitutes, snow and ice removal over time, and also you see other salary lines. We do have a deficit because we have a central office employee. He was a custodian. He was budgeted from custodian salary line. So if you net the difference between $81,000 for custodian salary and other salaries, we still have the ending positive balance. So this represents how we have a higher incidence of leave of absence for our custodians. So we have to pay the custodian sub. That's the two major reasons contribute to the primary deficit for the facility department salary. So after we discuss about general fund salary,
Can I ask a
the-
question?
Sure.
Just on that, do we think that that need for custodial substitutes will continue in coming years? Was it just sort of a one-off last year, do we think, or is that a trend?
it could be a one-time thing because for those leave of absence, it's really difficult for us to project out for the future years. We just don't know if the employee, they will have any like a family leave of absence. So it's hard to say we're gonna have this chain continue for the future. So we can only see what's going on in next year.
And sorry, while you're paused, are there any other questions from our members? No, okay. Go ahead, thanks, Jenny.
Okay, moving to the next slide, that's our general funds expenditure. Also, I will focus on a couple highlighted variants here as well. The first one is instructional supplies and equipment function code from 2410 to 2455. The combined available balance in these instructional supply line, we have an available budget 147,464. The large balance was utilized to help us to supplement other general funds deficit lines. The second is our transportation function code 3300. The total deficit in this function at the end of June 23 was $65,000. There are two major reasons contribute to this deficit. The first reason is due to we have to add additional bus due to the Beaver Brook Bridge closure, and in fiscal year 23 we incurred $76,000 for the fuel escalation cost. Another important reason that's connected to we have overspending for our special education vans because our special education fleet is really aged. So the repair and maintenance costs are much higher than we expected for last fiscal year. Luckily, we received the town's APA funding support for $181,000 in fiscal year 23. So we were able to cover the gap by the APA fund support. So now we currently have approximately $49,000 remaining in the APA funding. So we can use that funding to help us to alleviate the pressure for fiscal year 24's fuel escalation cost.
And we don't need that extra bus anymore, right?
We do not know because the bridge is
it's coming.
At least one-way traffic,
Right.
if they have to keep working on it,
They
right?
told us that they'd get the buses going.
Great.
So next slide, that's looking to facility department's expenditure, which is function code 4110 through function code 4230. The combined deficit for facility department is $171,071. This number is approximately 3.6% overage than the original budget. The underfunded areas you can see here, there are custodial services, maintenance of buildings, and maintenance of equipment. So these ongoing trend has persisted for several years. So this doesn't mean, because that's a relatively big deficit, but that doesn't mean the facility department didn't manage their budget well, rather than we didn't allocate sufficient resources for the facility department at the beginning of fiscal year 23. And historically, we were able to use general funds other operating budget line to cover this deficit area. However, this is a persistent challenge since we haven't been able to, support facility department as needed. Another two lines I would like to mention here is heating for the building, because we have a relatively warm winter. That's why we have some remaining budget for the function code 4120. And for utility service, the reason we have 73,000 positive ending balance, because we have the solar credit to help with the utility service line. And for the second chart, you can see the breakdown for the deficit between the salary and non-salary lines. Next slide, let's discuss about special education tuition from function code 9100 through function code 9400. Special education tuitions continue to have a major impact for our general funds budget. There are three funding sources for special education tuition, which is general fund, circuit breaker grant, and also grant 240. Below you can see a breakdown for our fiscal year 23's special education tuition by each funding source. The total fiscal year 23's budget for special education tuition was $5.3 million. The final actual tuition we pay was $5.8 million. So resulting a difference for $530,515. The deficit was absorbed by the circuit breaker around $2 million, the grant 240, 820,000, and the general funds remaining balance. So this spreadsheet gives you the detailed spending for private day school, private residential, collective, and also other public, Massachusetts public schools by each funding source. Next slide. So after we wrap up the general fund spending, let's dive into the non-general fund and special revenue funds. The first one we're going to talk about is food service. Food service revolving account, by the end of the fiscal year, we have an ending balance $969,000. That means we are in a good financial standing. Last semester, when we had a finance subcommittee meeting, we had a discussion with our food service director, Colleen Wallace, because it's recommended by DESI. It's better to remain ending balance in the food service revolving account equivalent to 3 months of the food service operational cost. So each month, the operational cost for food service is around $250,000. So the safety cushion for the food service revolving account will be $750,000. So when you see this almost $1 million in our food service account, actually it's not huge. It's a really safe and healthy cushion in the food service revolving account. Other than this, one of the good news is universal free meal has been funded by governor's budget for next school year. Actually, it's not just next school year. The state legislature already set aside $171 million funding to permanently fund the school meal for our students, which is really beneficial for our food service account. Next slide, let's get into the federal grants and state grant, the Fund 0255 and the Fund 0265. We continue to efficiently manage our grants by submitting the timely reimbursement on a monthly basis. When you see the grants quarterly report, you can see some grants, they have a deficit for the ending balance. That's due to the timing difference, because we spend the money for the last quarter of the fiscal year, but the reimbursement won't be coming until the beginning of next school year. So next slide, we will talk about the Special Education Reserve Fund. As I previously mentioned, we transferred $200,000 to the Special Education Reserve Fund. So by the end of fiscal year 23, we have an ending balance $522,000 reserve in stabilization. This stabilization fund is particularly crucial to help us to reduce the pressure for fiscal year 24's 14% special education tuition increase, and also help us to adjust the challenge down the road. Next slide, we will discuss about school choice. For fiscal year 23, the total school choice revenue we received was $453,000 with 70.75 FTE. The total budgeted offset from school choice to general fund is $560,915. The actual school choice offset we utilized in fiscal year 23 was $295,000. So some of the budgeted offset from school choice were not used in fiscal year 23. So we make that reserve in the school choice stabilization account. By the end of fiscal year 23, the ending balance for school choice was $1.6 million. Because school committee approved around $350,000 EL curriculum be deducted from the school choice. So this $350,000 will be a minus from this 1.6 funding balance in fiscal year 24. The last slide for our other special revenue fund, I'm going to talk about transportation. The total transportation revenue from the busing fee we received in fiscal year 23 was $704,000. That could be broken down into 2 school years. So for last school year, that amount was $513,000. For school year 23 to 24, we received $191,000. So we will receive the remaining for our bus fee in fiscal year 24. So these just wrap up my presentation for last fiscal year. And at the end, I would like to use this opportunity to say thank you to the wonderful business team because their hard work and also the wonderful job that they have done for the fiscal year end. So that contribute to a successful closure of the fiscal year. Especially we have new employee in their new position. It's a huge learning curve for everybody. So they always try to help and support each other. So I want to just express my gratitude here for their exceptional job.
Thank you.
So thank
And
you. Do you have any?
you're doing an exceptional job leading the department too. So thank
Thank
you
you.
for your work. And yes, you have had some shifts over the course of the year, which can just be problematic at any time. But as you're trying to, you're right, tie all the loose ends up and figure out all the reports, I feel like I think that the department has done an excellent job. So thank you for your leadership and their work.
Thank you. And the memo just walks through it all so methodically that, I'm like, I don't really have any questions. The one thing I was thinking about, as you walked through Special Education Reserve Fund and School Choice, it doesn't explicitly tell me, and maybe we talked about it, which one you plan to pay for the FY24 special education out-of-district private increase.
Special Education Reserve Fund.
Okay.
At the time when we were talking about it,
Yeah.
we didn't have that much money.
Right, we
in
were
it.
thinking about
So
school choice,
the actual gap, we knew that we would need, we knew that we had the money in the school choice revolving account to
Yep.
use for that one-time fund. And we might still choose to do that, depending on, what if there are other additional needs. Because the thing about the stabilization fund, which the reason why, we established it and why we've been building it up is that ideally you have significant reserves there so that the variability that exists within special education is able to be absorbed every year,
Right.
and you're able to budget more consistently with special education. If we use the
If we wipe it out,
stabilization
right.
for this one-time cost right now, where we know that we have the school choice funds to do that,
Yeah.
I feel like it's setting us up for a problem in the future again. So ideally, we would increase that fund so that it could absorb more of the fluctuation that takes place.
And it's taken us a couple years
Oh,
to get to that
yeah.
balance, so, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Ah.
nice to see it grow.
Yeah. And remind me, is it 2 boards to
Yeah.
spend it?
Yep.
Okay, yeah, that's what I thought. Sorry, the select board and the school committee
Right.
need to vote to,
To remove things from that.
Got
So
it.
you can put
Right, right.
funds into it like you did, but in order to access those funds, it requires both boards to approve it.
yep, great. Any other questions in the room or on Zoom?
Yeah, I don't know if have we talked in this forum about how the universal free lunch program works and how what the funding mechanism is and how that impacts development of the budget and tracking those expenses?
Yes, actually, we had a discussion in our finance subcommittee about how does the fund allocate to each school and system-wide, and that's something we're gonna continue to work on for fiscal year '24. So I'm assuming we're gonna continue to have those discussions in our finance subcommittee meeting to review the full service account for the future school years as well.
That might be a good thing, though, for the full committee, for
Yeah.
us to have a time when we invite Colleen Wallace to come and talk about the program in general, and that might be, because that really is a significant change for the future, and so I think it'll be helpful for people to understand what does that mean. Yeah.
And, right.
Yeah.
Catherine,
Thanks.
Mari, any questions?
No, I'm good. All set.
Thank you. Bill, Sean, good?
No, I think the only question I had, and this may be totally off base, but I know the recent paid family medical leave law in Massachusetts, does that FMLA or that law interject in any way? Are they different, or is that just handled completely by the, I know that it was recently passed in 2023. When you talk about the leave of absences and stuff and those spikes that are unexpected, are there tips or ideas that the state gives us to potentially plan for those contingencies? I don't know.
It still becomes our responsibility.
Right, of course.
So what that does is it articulates how in which people can use the leaves, and it guarantees people access to their jobs.
Yep.
It doesn't necessarily, to your point, they don't provide helpful guidance to us.
Yeah. We're talking about the spikes, right? Like the
Yeah.
14% out of
Right.
district costs, right? Thinking about
There
evening the cushion, right? The
And
cushion.
it kind of that's like in line with Chris's question about with the custodians, right? Like we know that we just always have had a healthier substitute line item for our teachers because we just knew that there were more of them, right? So there are more teachers in general. And so, and to Jenny's presentation, she just talked that this year specifically, or the previous year, we didn't have as many long-term leaves. So therefore, we still had some of that money left in the account. And so, whereas with the custodial, it's a much smaller department, so the budget itself is naturally smaller. But the other thing that happens sometimes, which is a little bit different, and again, this can complicate it as well too, so I don't want to throw this out there, but it depends on the things that can also, it's not just FMLA, right? Like there are other times we have had some leaves with our custodial or with maintenance that is more an injury, right? Or something that might be a little bit different than even some planned leaves that might take place, right? And so I feel like that's another piece of it that contributes to that, and that we typically do not, we struggle keeping our day-to-day classroom subs, like we could always use more classroom subs on a day-to-day basis. We don't typically struggle finding long-term subs, right? Because there are people who are normally willing, whether they're retired, whether they're doing something, and they're willing to commit to something a little bit longer. Custodial subs across the board is difficult, right? Both on the day-to-day basis, and then often when somebody is out, that can also just end up being additional work on other members of the team, which could result in increased overtime.
Sure.
You know.
Thank you. Thanks, Jenny. I know there's another sub-bullet under here for you, right?
Right,
Special education van leases renewal.
right.
So everybody should see another memo in the packet. And if you want to just give an overview of what we're being asked.
Okay, so before we have any discussion, let me provide you with some background information. We manage our special education transportation in-house. So currently we have 18 special education vans. All those leases were originally signed at 15 years ago. They all expired. So the majority of our special education van have accumulated very high mileage. So they are either a little bit over or a little bit under 100,000 miles. So that means, and we are paying very low monthly lease costs, but significantly high for the repair and maintenance cost. That's why it's kind of imperative to renew those special education van leases. We recently received the quotes from the current company. The name is Merchant Fleet, for 7 passenger seats, 10 passenger seats, and high roof vans with wheelchair. So we were able to put in some data analysis together for those special education vans. I would like to say thank you for the help from Jennifer Piper, our transportation manager. She helped us to put in the data together. So Chrissy, if you can help to scroll down to the second page of this memo, you can see a list of summary for our special education vans here. In this spreadsheet, you can see on the leases already expire on 2020 or 2021. There's a column for the lease payment amount we are currently paying. That's the column for June. The next column gives you the lease payment amount updated with the new quote. So you can tell the monthly lease cost will increase a lot for the new updated quote. So we are thinking if we can renew 11 out of 18 of those special education vans. So if you scroll down to next page on the bottom of this chart, we can tell our monthly lease payment will go up from 11,000 to 22,000. So the yearly lease cost will increase from 134,000 to 271,000. So although the lease cost will increase significantly, but our repair and maintenance costs will reduce significantly as well. So the total estimated repair and maintenance costs will reduce from 77,000 to 25,000. And also for D-Bus contracted service, we estimate the cost will go down from 744,000 to 689,000. The reason for this decrease, because Jen Piper is planning to take back 3 routes from D that cost $200 per route, and we are planning to give D a route cost $250. So this way we will provide more flexibility for the routing and more seating for our students. So overall, if you see the total cost, there will be additional budget needed for fiscal year 24 for $29,000. currently we do have some reserve fund or cushion in our transportation revolving account, so that could be utilized to pay this additional cost. So that's the ask. We are trying to ask school committee if we can consider this for fiscal year 24. Something I would like to point out is those quotes will expire on September 10th. So the timing is running short, and Merchant Fleet actually suggests us to do that before the school year starts, so we can minimize the disruption for the school year. And from the procurement point of view, special education transportation services are exempt from Chapter 30B, so we don't have to go through the procurement process, but we still did our due diligence. We tried to get the quotes from two companies. First one is Merchant Fleet, the other one is Motor Lease. So Motor Lease is the major competitor in the market for the special education vans, but they do not own any inventory in-house, so they have to go to the market to find those vehicles. As of now, we haven't received any quotes from the second company, so it seems like that's the best deal we can get at this moment. And if we are thinking renewal of all our special education vans, the total additional budget will be much higher, because we still have a couple cargo caravans. They are their mileage is relatively low. That's why we are suggesting just renew 11 of those vehicles. So we have 7 remaining, so we can review in the future.
Okay.
Couple of things, could I just add, things that you said there, Jane, just want to clarify some things too. So, yes, we own 18 special education vans, but that we have more routes than that. That's why some of our routes are also then, we contract with D. So when we talk about the contracted service with D, that's above and beyond what our larger buses, the full-size buses that they are running on a regular basis. That's a different conversation. And so, yeah, I agree. I thank Jen Piper for the work that she did. Both Jenny and Jen were really working hard on this to look to see, wait a second, what could we possibly do? One of the conversations that we've been having all along has been looking at electrical vehicles as well too. That came up at a subcommittee meeting, and we talked about that. This is just about trying to fix the issue with the leases, the vans that we currently have right now. We're still exploring the viability of perhaps purchasing an electric van or two. The one challenge with that is we have to be super mindful of its ability to do the work that we need it to do, right? And if we purchase a van in the future, we'll go through the capital process to do that, and then we would have access to the rebates that exist with electrical vehicle purchasing. If we lease one, it will just be even more expensive. We don't know. We need these vans right now. We need to explore an electrical vehicle when we have a backup.
Right.
To in case that doesn't work, and so that's the other aspect of it. Did I say that correctly?
Yes, because actually we received quotes for EV vans. So the cost is around like $700 more than a gas vehicle. And we compare the quote for the leasing option and the purchasing option. And purchasing option, actually we get a much better deal because we can receive $7,500 from the federal credit and another $7,500 from Massachusetts State EVIP program. So if we can do a purchasing, so there would be a better deal than just leasing a vehicle, paying the monthly cost. So that's something, as Dr. Chu mentioned, we have to go through the capital request through the town.
So to lease an electric van was $700 per month more?
Yes.
So like
then,
$2,300 a month versus the 16 and change?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And we still just don't know yet if it would really be viable
Meet our
with
needs,
what
yeah.
the student needs are.
Right.
As far as range,
Yes.
I would.
That's the
My
conversation.
guess-
We've been working closely with Sue Thomas about looking
Yeah,
at
my
all
guess
that,
is
so-
there's no route that we do that a full charge wouldn't do on an EV van, but I haven't looked at that, so.
Catherine, I see you, but Sean has his hand up first.
Yeah, so, okay. So the answer to why we're not, why we're not leasing electric vehicles, that it's cost prohibitive to lease at this, and the needs of the district. Okay, I got that. My question is this, we're looking to enter into another 15-year lease?
No, 5 years.
5-year lease, okay.
5-year lease,
Yeah.
close-end lease.
It-
So after 5 years, we can do another renewal.
Okay. So, and then this is 11 out of 18 of the vehicles?
Yes.
Okay.
So then we'll look, and that gives us time then to discuss, to decide next year what we want to do. And it gives us more time to decide if one of those then gets changed out with an EV vehicle.
Okay, and then the maintenance costs that we're looking at here, these are what we're paying in district? Or like, do we have someone who is repairing these on site?
No,
or-
we don't.
Yeah, Okay,
No, we actually, they're
We have a garage we usually go to.
contract.
okay. And this $25,000 number, I'll take it, this is just an estimate based off of,
Right, it's a projection based on the regular oil change, tire rotation, just regular repair and maintenance cost.
and
For
that's.
these newer vans.
Right.
And that
Yeah,
would be,
because
lower
we gonna
mileage,
have
newer
newer vehicles, so we don't need to spend on like step repairs, all those kinds of due to the aging of our old vehicles.
okay. And that would be another concern of 11 new electric vehicles, right? That we don't know what the repair and maintenance costs for dealing with an electric vehicle might be versus a carbon or an combustion engine.
Can I speak to that?
Yeah.
It's gonna be a lot less. I would venture to say that we would easily save the 700 per vehicle per month
Really?
in maintenance. Well, 700 a month, that's 7,000, that's 84,000 a year, right?
Right.
No, we could, so we have 24,000, so we wouldn't say that. But, I mean, I will tell you, I mean, EV, for having two EVs, and vans are gonna be different. They're gonna have more wear and tear, so but there's no oil changes, there's no
Right.
filters.
Right.
It's
That's
tire management, and
definitely
that's it.
true.
And charging costs, we would be incurring electricity costs to charge them, so that is a factor.
I
But we
guess
have fuel costs now, so we're not factoring.
That's my, and I don't mean to steal the mic, but I guess that's my biggest concern. I mean, 5 years is a lot of time. That the technology is changing quickly. We as a committee have committed ourselves to, being as sustainable as possible. I think, having committing ourselves to another 5 years for more combustion
60 months.
engines, I don't know. I understand. I get it. It's a need for the district. It seems like it's something that we need to. I don't know. I wish that there was more opportunity with having more of our fleet be electric now.
Right.
We can certainly also reduce, like, we looked at the cost of replacing the entire fleet, and we've gone backwards from there so that we were able to keep it within the FY '24 budget, that's already been approved with the addition that Jenny had talked about. We could certainly look at still reducing this number. Replacing the entire fleet with EVs, we don't have the capacity to charge them. So that's the other piece of it, like, right now. Like, we
Installing
knew that the only thing we're exploring, and again, we've been looking at this for a while, we did present it to the subcommittee, and we're still looking at it, was looking at getting 1 or 2 EV vans so that we can, again, as we start to build the capacity, because we just wouldn't we only have the 4 stations out here, so that would be another piece of it that would be problematic because I hear what you're saying, and this 5-year commitment is for whichever amount we decide to move on right now. We're looking at the ability to change over a significant percentage of the fleet, which is rapidly aging, and
And I would say maybe the newer vans are an improvement on
Sure.
the aging ones. And I just wanted to add too, from a finance subcommittee, last spring, we have a very detailed analysis that was on my summer list to finish up those minutes. But I can certainly send that out to the fuller committee, because Jenny and Jen did a great job breaking down all the trade-offs and factoring in the rebates too. So my takeaway from that conversation months ago was that it wouldn't just be a flip to the whole fleet being electrified. So while I hear you, it's like a 5-year commitment, but I think we still have some wiggle room in those 7 that are left that we could still move on.
Right. Another piece I want to add, when we request for the quotes, for both companies, they can only offer 2 or 3 EVs because they don't have too many vehicles, and they are waiting for a long time for the supply chain. So that's another concern. Even we are planning to replace all of them for the EV, they don't have the inventory.
Helpful, thank you.
Yes, that's another thing.
Let's jump to Catherine. So. What?
I was saying Catherine.
Oh yeah. Do you want to unmute her? Is she?
I think she.
Oh, Catherine, go ahead. Can you?
Hi. So forgive me, Jenny, if I miss some. The sound isn't always great at picking it up, and I've looked at the documents. Forgive me if I'm wrong, but I looked. It appears that the new lease rate would cost higher than our annual maintenance that we're currently spending. Am I reading that right?
So the new lease rate, yes, that's correct.
Okay. So my next question would be, of the vehicles that we're looking at extending the 5-year lease, are any of these ending up out of service on a regular, frequent basis that we're like stuck without a van? And I'm so that we're scrambling to find like a replacement van or something because they're in the workshop for like 3 or 4 days.
I do not believe that we're scrambling. I believe that the balance that currently exists with the needs, that the transportation, Jen Pipers has been able to manage that. I know that there'd be a concern if we had too many vans down, but I think she's been able to make it work, if that answers your question.
Okay. Just my thinking, and along what Sean was saying, and I know as a committee we've kind of said longer term we definitely are looking at committing ourselves to kind of that electric fleet, however that comes about. But I also think another part of the sustainability aspect of is also using what we have as well for as long as we possibly can. And so I know we have relatively high mileage on some of these vans, but if they're still functioning well, if they're still fit for purpose, would it also not be the right thing to do in terms of thinking of sustainability, of continuing to use these vehicles while maybe we explore more rather than tying us in for 5 years? The other thing is I know it's briefly been mentioned in the budget task force when you talk about maintenance. I have no idea as well if this will come to fruition at any point. But I think, and correct me, Val, if I have got this information wrong, but I think in some conversations that have been happening within budget task force, there's been looking at kind of bringing efficiency to various services. And I think I had remembered, I think it was Christina Green mentioning how some towns also will have like in-house or in-town, mechanic departments who service all this towns, and I'm going to assume school vans and fleets. And again, I think would that also be something to consider? I just want us to be very mindful of money that we're committing to right this very minute for 5 years when we really don't know what our budget looks like past FY24. And considering the town is going through a lot of work at the moment, and we haven't seen any information yet on their um, on their reports and findings, do we have an option on kind of holding tight for one more year with these van leases and then coming back to reassess? Sorry, that was very long-winded.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm like,
Go.
just speak, yeah. Sorry.
Catherine, I'm glad you said that, because I definitely would be interested in thinking a little bit more about the, you know, the most environmental car is often the one you're already driving. You know, as nice as it is to upgrade to EV or a newer, more efficient car, the cost of production and things like that is often better. But also the fiscal impact. And I like the idea of, and I've done this myself, driving a car until it's more expensive to maintain the car you have versus, you know, the nice new car. Now, there may be other factors at play that, you know, Jen Piper would probably love to tell me about, you know, why this is going to make things better. But I would certainly look to keeping vans that are still cheaper to maintain than the cost to lease its replacement. And then maybe looking at if maybe there are a couple that are really problematic or have been problematic or are really close to a major maintenance issue or something. And then maybe we look at leasing an EV or buying, you know, because you're right, we don't have the infrastructure right now to charge a fleet of EVs, but maybe we say, what's it like to have an EV special education van? Does it do the job? Can we charge them here or wherever it is that we may want to charge them? And so I appreciate, Catherine, you thinking along those lines.
I think the reason that this conversation started was definitely the increased maintenance costs, right? So I know that there's growing frustration with that. Whether or not it's completely at critical point yet, I didn't get that impression. But I will say, Jenny and I know Jen Piper, we were looking at the fact that the district was operating with paying a company money where we have no lease agreement with them. And so we're basically just paying money for vehicles that it seemed like, you know, we had gone so long with never updating this lease that seemed to be irresponsible. So we were trying to figure out how we could be better stewards of our money and actually put it towards vehicles that are actually in better shape and providing better service. Everything you're saying, I think, sounds great. It's a good point. I just think that's a good thing for us to then capture, because I don't believe that the reason why we're paying all of these maintenance costs and continuing to pay for vans where we have no updated lease agreement with the company was ever like a financial choice of the committees, as much as it just kept getting rolled by. So I just want that to be clear, you know, that we weren't looking to like, hey, woo, you know, let's spend a lot of money and let's get a lot of new stuff. It was more that as we were looking at this and trying to be responsible with what we have, we were saying we don't necessarily think this continues to make sense, but we could certainly, you know, I think.
So it sounds like the quote would expire. If we don't
It
take
does.
action tonight, the quote would expire, right?
Right, and also the vendor, they wanted a resolution for those overturn for our leases as well. And because we basically don't have any documentation to roll over anymore for those expired lease. That's another concern.
Some of those vans in the 11 are incurring a higher lease payment per month. Is that because of the maintenance costs have just the damage, the wear has done them?
Well, some of them
They're the
were
newer
just
ones.
some of them just were different
Okay, just-
monthly
yeah.
costs when they did come in. You know, like they were kind of rolled in. So there
Yeah.
were some of them that were newer
Okay.
leases than others.
Got it. Okay, I see that, yeah.
If I remember correctly, a couple years ago, before my time, the assistant finance director tried to negotiate those leases costs down for a couple vehicles. So we kept those old vehicles, and so that's why you see like a different monthly cost for those leases.
Yeah, it was a negotiation.
Right.
I mean, Dr. Sure, I hear what you're saying, but it's still more expensive to do the new leases, so that's where I'm like,
Yep.
well, but yeah.
No,
I mean, I don't have the subjective sense too of how good of shape they're in, and whether their service to the students is adequate. You know, I think that, for me, that's a big, if it is, you know, there's cosmetic things, I guess, that could come into play as well. You know, do they look run down, you know, is it, you know, make people not feel comfortable with them, that sort of thing could be a factor.
What was the determination for these 11? I can't seem to find like a pattern.
Is it a Ford,
Is it-
is it just the Ford renewals that we're talking about? Because the
Oh.
other grouping is the
Ford
Dodge.
Transit.
I was
Dodge
looking at
Caravan.
mileage.
That seems to be
looking
the,
Right.
so is it
And-
something with the Ford Transit that
Yes.
we need to be worried about, or?
No, it was just more, I think that was the grouping of them. It is the difference between, I don't have it open in front of me, but it's also the difference between the size of the vans.
Right,
Okay.
absolutely, yeah,
Yes,
because
that's
larger
right.
capacity.
7 passenger seats.
Yep.
Versus
Yep.
10. And
Yeah.
Our
versus
Dodges
10.
are smaller typically, yeah.
Looks like, Catherine, do you have a new question?
I'm just wondering, so we're looking at if we have to vote on this tonight, but I'm just feeling like that this might be slightly bigger than just a one meeting conversation. You know, I'm kind of proposing, would we consider, I know we don't have a meeting on the agenda before Jen would need a vote from us, but, you know, would we consider pushing this to a meeting, an emergency meeting like next week, to give us all a bit more time to understand the scope of this and maybe get some more information? Because right now, I don't feel I could take a vote on this tonight.
Thanks for that. Is there consensus around that proposal?
I wouldn't mind seeing, take another look at this and understand a little bit better some of the thinking on van selection and things like that.
What is the, can I ask Jenny, we know when the quote expires, is there an expectation for a response before the quote expires? Like, if they were to have a different conversation, when would we have to have that conversation by, if we were to move forward with this? Do you know?
We might have to ask Merchant Fleet if they can give any kind of extension.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because it,
But they're saying that the quotes expire the 10th of September,
Right.
which
it's a Sunday.
so like even if we had, I'm just saying, if we had a meeting Friday morning, the 8th of September, you would still have time based on that conversation that day, and if we did a vote that day, you would still be in time to respond back to them with the, because the quote wouldn't have expired.
September 10th.
Right, on Friday afternoon.
And we have a meeting on the 11th, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we could, I mean, we could let's,
Okay.
we could
Two-day
certainly reach
extension.
out to them tomorrow and explain that we have a meeting on the 11th.
Could they give us a 2-day extension?
Yeah.
I'm thinking, I think I'm in the same boat as Catherine. You know, let's get some more information as to these particular vans. Because, like, we all know, and we've been saying this every year, but I really think this is the year everything is going to be very tight financially, right? So, as being good financial stewards, I think that we take one more look at this over how the vans were chosen, why they're needed, and before we commit to, you know, a cost. Because if I'm understanding, the delta here is it's $29,400 a month, right?
No.
No, a whole
Oh,
year.
whole year.
A whole
Okay.
year.
Okay.
So I want to be,
Good.
I want to remind everybody about that this really does fit within, I mean, basically fits within the FY24 budget.
Right. it
Which
does.
also is safe to assume these costs, our current costs, are not going to go down.
Okay.
So for FY25, we're not going to see a savings here specifically with the same fleet that we have.
Right.
So, but so when we're talking about the FY25 budget and the FY26 budget, to me, the conversation I would think would be more about, is it better to not move forward with these and explore the goals to electrify, in different ways. We wouldn't have brought this to you if this really wasn't sustainable within the FY24 budget.
Okay.
But because it is sustainable within the already approved FY24 budget, that's why we thought this was an appropriate time to do that.
Okay. I'm going to take a stab at summarizing what I'm hearing and then move us on. So I think we can sort of ask for some follow-up information, see what the reaction is from Jen Piper, what you guys think the impact would be to students and services. What kind of, it does say in my follow-up email with you, you said about minimal disruptions to turn over the fleet, so want to understand that a little bit too. Then we could do sort of like a one-way update, right, to me, and try to determine whether we need that interim meeting or not. Everybody good?
Yep, thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for that. We are moving on, thank you, Jenny.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Jenny.
We are moving on to school committee summer retreat update and committee goals. So all of you should have seen an email from me with a recap of our retreat, and minutes will be ready soon. There were 2 business items that we covered. A managed print service contract from Xerox for ink and toner needs, and Mari and Ming Chen will remember that topic from a finance subcommittee meeting in the spring, and that was discussed as a committee at the retreat, and we decided that it fell under policy 3501, allowing the director of finance to administer purchasing for schools, and the committee agreed that it was the right next step, but did not need to take formal action. So I assume that message was shared with the appropriate people. The other business item we did take up was added design service to original MSBA submission for the Blanchard roof, and to include putting those new HVAC units as part of the design service. So the fun strategy part of the conversations were about reviewing our operating protocols, which everybody knows has been sort of helping us focus our business meetings and be efficient, and just kind of helping build that relationship between the committee and the superintendent. And we had a good discussion about those, and felt good about how they are working currently, and felt that they did not need any updates, so that was approved earlier in our consent agenda. Other good thoughts that I just wanted to highlight, continuing our 2-meeting practice for votes with some rare exceptions was highlighted as worth continuing. The committee in some of our organizational strategy conversations talked about how to improve our packets, staff presentations, so some of that just hasn't come to fruition yet in the summer time frame, but we will hopefully start working those out with our return to in-person agenda settings, and Catherine and I will bring those to administration. We also had a productive discussion and reflections on incidents in the past year in the school committee related to DEI, and what expectations the committee felt like we needed as far as timely and what level of timely communication updates, and what level of information we could reasonably expect going forward. And I think that those were really great conversations to sort of have to start the year. And as a new chair, I appreciate hearing from all the committee members during that retreat, and just really trying to start off the new year as productive as possible. Anyone want to add anything to that before I move on to goals?
Just to say, are we gonna print the guidelines and sign them?
The protocols?
Protocol, sorry.
Yes. Kathy has a copy tonight.
Okay.
Great.
Thanks. It'll be a multi-week thing since we're not all here.
We're a
but
little
we'll get there.
Yeah. So the other big takeaway from the retreat was, I think you can speak to sort of the longevity, but the first time the committee has laid out specific goals, at least in the time that I've been on the committee. And I want to thank Catherine for sort of driving that and putting them on paper based on our discussions. I think it's great to give us some focus to all the work that happens throughout the year and our committee members' energies. And so they're up on the screen, they're in the packet. Goal 1 is to make data-driven decisions by increasing the visibility and inclusion of data reports at meetings. We've got some action steps, some success criteria. I wasn't going to read every
No.
line by line. Goal 2, to continue to support and improve the social emotional well-being of our students and staff. This one's pretty exciting. I think a lot of families will be interested in seeing, but the committee is going to propose forming a school start time working group. Goal 3 is committed to creating a fiscally responsible FY25 budget while being mindful of the impact on staff, students, and families. So one thing that last year's finance subcommittee worked on was a review of fees, and we made it through the early arrival option, the parking, and the bus fee off the top of my head. So there's a couple more that I thought made sense for that group to continue with this coming year. Goal 4 was to continue supporting and improving the diversity, equity, and inclusion work across the district and community by having the policy subcommittee review some specific but selected policies with a DEI review. And those are proposed to the full committee for discussion and potential vote at our next September meeting. Any discussion, questions, comments?
I would just point, I mean, it was a really, I'm so glad we did it.
Mm-hmm.
We had, in our very first retreat, I think in retreat, yeah, that's the right word. In 2017, I think we did put goals on paper, but they weren't really actionable. They were more like priority areas. And so I think this is a nice step forward in that regard. And for people who might be watching at home, if there's anybody out there watching at home, I think it's good to point out these are definitely like the school committee goals. Now, they can be, and in some cases are, very much supporting the work we do, and sometimes could be a little bit like inside baseball, like here's how we want to improve these processes within ourselves. But they should and do support the broader district goals. And so they do, I think they do align nicely with the SDIP goals and to the superintendent's goals for the year. So it's a little bit of both for people who have, well, nobody's really seen this.
Right.
Our goals before. So just if people are wondering what that looks like, they're not goals for what the district's going to do. That's why we have the SDIP and the school improvement plans. These are really, for us as a committee, how do we do our job better in supporting all of that other work.
And I think that was a really helpful conversation to have, is like, where is that boundary and what things are in our influence or in our control that, you know, some of it is work that would happen already, but to articulate it, tie it into those sort of big picture visions, I think is really exciting.
I just want to point out too that I appreciate having this in one document, right, and organized the way that it is, and I appreciate Valerie and Catherine putting this together, because I mean, it really is, it follows basically the same format that we're reviewing later today, that we're talking about the superintendent's goals, right? Like, it's articulated in the same way: goals, action steps, and then criteria that will show whether or not that goal's been achieved. So I appreciate that. It shows that this committee's trying to hold themselves to the same standard that we're holding the superintendent. So
Yep.
yeah.
And I can tell Dr. Chu just can't wait to like evaluate us back.
I was curious as to how
Super
that,
fashion.
did you talk
Just
about
kidding.
that, how that's going to play out? Like who's
No,
going to
it's
evaluate your
Yeah.
success?
Here's a lengthy rubric that's very difficult to type in too.
PDF.
I have enough of those.
Our-
Inedible PDF.
Our evaluation is unfortunately at the ballot box, which you are,
That is true.
cannot.
That's true.
We
take
will
part in.
revisit. No, we will, but we will
Oh, yeah,
come back
we'll
around.
check.
We will do a
Yes,
self-evaluation
yes.
at the end of the year.
Yes, and, you know, one of those things that's sort of been mentioned is working to try to annotate these on the agenda. So like if there is work that is on our business meeting, that's always another place to articulate it, to really highlight it for the public. So in our future agenda setting meetings, we will have these front and center and try to help move those along, as well as the strategic district improvement and superintendent goals. So all of those things we hope to just keep giving oxygen to and sunlight to. Anything to add, Catherine or Mari?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Thanks. Catherine.
No, I think they're articulated well.
You wrote them, so.
Says the person who articulated them.
Thank you. Okay, so there's no vote there. We're going to follow our own 2-meeting rule for our own goals. And I'm blanking on the, okay.
Enrollment.
So, yeah, sorry, thank you. Fall enrollment update is next. 8:25, right on the dot.
That's right. There you go. Good for you.
Sabotaging and planning.
Right.
on the schedule.
So with the student enrollment that we have uploaded here for our as of August 25th, I compared it to our October 1 numbers from last year, just so we could see where we're at.
Yeah.
So overall, the numbers, we right now we have our total district preschool through 12 is 4,629. That's 87 students less than what we had last year for our October 1 numbers.
Wow.
Yep, 87 less. So that where we see the majority of that change is at the high school level. There's 63 students less at Westford Academy this year than there was last year. There's 10 less students at the middle school as of August 25th. I mean, that could change in the next couple of days, as it does, but that's okay. And that could be with any of them, not just middle school. There's 10 less in middle school. We have 4 more in kindergarten to 5. And that's really like the big shift. We have 18 less preschool students in the total number. And that, I was looking to see, is that because we have different students who are doing preschool in the morning versus, and I was looking to see that it is overall, there's about 18 less throughout the district. The challenges that we've seen, which we talked about a little bit in the summer as well too, is that while we've seen some of the numbers change, they haven't necessarily decreased in certain areas. So we had, with the population of Robinson is growing. And so one of the things that I think we will need to be looking at very soon again will be with our master plan for our district, as we're looking to see what we're going to possibly be doing to our buildings, and if we're going to be doing new work on buildings specifically, is at what point do we need to re-engage in redistricting? Whether it's grade configuration or not, we might have to move towards shifting some of the lines, which can be difficult. It's something that we have not done for a long time in Westford, and it might be something that we have to again look at, because again the numbers are they're staying relatively steady. I mean, these decreases are not huge. They are in line with what we anticipated, but then where the bodies land, that's a really bad way of saying that. I apologize. Where the students end up.
Shares they consume.
Show up.
Where the students show up. It could change.
Right.
So that's something we need to look at. But that's where we are with our update. We'll give you another update as we tend to do in the fall. We give them to you more regularly, and then in the spring, after we have our budget discussion, we don't typically continue to count them because anything can change in the spring before this period of time.
Any questions, Catherine?
Yeah, just it came to mind as you were going through the numbers there, Dr. Chun, you were mentioning how we kind of had a decrease in like students at WA. When we talk about enrollment numbers, we typically don't tend to talk about them as well in connection to our out of district students who are maybe attending, other collaboratives or schools in the district. And I actually think that's a kind of an important piece of information that we should probably potentially include in our enrollment numbers, because we're not saying that some of these students have actually left the district.
Right.
They are, so I'm wondering, is that something we could look at including on future enrollment?
Yes, I absolutely think we can include that. I think that's an excellent point. We typically have these discussions focusing on sort of the space capacity, because when we're talking about our budget overall, and when we're talking about all of the different ways in which we're supporting students, we include all of our students. But I think you're right to not have all of our students listed here, even if they're not physically attending school within one of our buildings here in town. We should quantify that and share that.
Great.
Yeah, and I mean, we could even go a step further and say, should that also include and again, it's more because we're saying as a committee we want to be more data driven. Could we also add a line for how many students are being homeschooled within our district? Because technically, again, those students still come under our purview in that central office has to oversee their curriculum and kind of get signed off on it. And I just think it would be good data for us as a committee to just have that bigger picture. Okay, these are the number of students in our buildings and the breakdown, but these are our number of students being homeschooled, number of students in out of district placements, etc., to kind of just have a snapshot and being, I suppose, mindful of that sense of inclusion within our district.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point.
Yeah.
That's where that would be a longer conversation. We can certainly share that information, absolutely. But if we're talking about the Westford Public Schools student enrollment,
yes,
people who are homeschooling, they are not enrolled in Westford Public Schools for the most part. Some are for specific circumstances, but you're right. There is a relationship, but there isn't there. And so that's how we just want to make sure that we would be clearly articulating that, and I think in a respectful, inclusive way. But we can certainly share that. We can share that. I'll just look and see how we, as you were even asking those questions, Kathy Mucci, who helps prepare this, was nodding her head because she knows we do have all that data.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Catherine's just trying to get a jump on goal number 1.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So.
Right.
Any other?
Yeah, that's my work done for the whole year now.
Yeah.
Goal achieved.
Good.
Oh, actually, I have a quick question.
Mm-hmm.
Chris, you said there's an 18 decline in preschool total?
From last year at this time.
Okay. But preschool, it's, I mean, at least half of it is IEP students, correct?
Right. Correct. Correct. So what I didn't dive into is to see, is that a combination of just students who aren't actually eligible to receive? There's fewer students who are receiving those services this year, and or is it in connection with tuition paying students who would be accessing the program who are not there to receive services? Because they're not every child within the preschool program is receiving services. We do have general education students who are able to participate.
Right.
And that's on a tuition, because that's for preschool.
Okay.
So that's what I'll look at, and I can get that. I can share that information next time. Yep.
Anything, Chris? I think that, just to follow up, I think that would be helpful to see just because I know some of that programming is subsidized by the tuition. So it'd just be interesting to see, understand that a little bit more. Great, thank you. So next on our agenda is a brief discussion about fall building tours. So this is usually on our September agendas to sort of start planning what committee members would like to see in the fall. It's sort of evolved over the past couple of years. The last year or two, I think, has been really shepherded by curriculum coordinators and smaller groups. This came up a little bit at the retreat, and some ideas that were thrown around were sort of with the new hire of Mr. Coughlin, like maybe having a special education lens to it, or as part of his tours. Another idea that was talked about at the retreat was with the master plan lens that's articulated in our STIP and offshoot of the feasibility study. A request to potentially see some of the new literacy curriculum in action. Another point to sort of discuss as a committee is like whether we would visit every building or sort of one per grade level. I know that they are during the workday. They are a little challenging for everybody to sort of try to get accessible to. And last year, I think we did have some trouble filling all of the slots for all 9 buildings. And maybe they were just all a little bit too, that was the other thing we talked about, was maybe spreading them out a little bit so that they weren't time away from work or other responsibilities sort of all jammed in together. So just opening it up, so as administration sort of comes up with maybe a proposal, what would the committee like to see or discuss? Yeah, Chris?
So you've highlighted this, but I do feel like we've evolved from kind of a mile wide and inch deep. The whole committee as a big throng is going to go to every school, and and you don't necessarily see everything or see a lot when you do that. And I think last year was a great step. I think last year was the first year we've done that. We did do I can't remember the curriculum.
No, we've done it.
Did we do it to both years?
Yeah,
Okay.
we did it the first year.
Thank
too.
you.
Yeah.
And I'd be in favor of seeing that evolve even farther, and maybe have some just specialized, like, we're going to go see 2 schools and we're going to look at master plan type of things. We're going to go look at, facility needs of 2 schools on these days. If you're interested, go do that. We're going to go look at these 3 schools with an eye towards special education and social emotional learning.
Mm-hmm.
And like just offer a menu of a few different things. We visited some schools last year to look at Reach classrooms,
Right.
and that was really valuable. I think we learned a lot there. So I like the way we've moved in that direction. I think it addresses some of the concerns with people's availability and filling those slots. And it also, again, I think the throng of 7 committee members, while fun,
Yeah.
for us to be together in that
Little
way,
disruptive.
it's a little disruptive.
Yeah.
And I think we've seen that we get maybe a better impact
Yep.
for ourselves when we do it a different way.
Any reactions?
I mean, I will, as a current principal,
Yeah.
schedule's tight, but I would be interested in a special education tour, or just a general tour. I mean, I'm just all in. So, I mean, dates and making it work, and, I'm just looking to hit the ground running and support the good work that's happening in these schools. And,
What it's grown to become, I think, is exciting, right? And what I think we have really also built the capacity within just our full leadership team to really offer a buffet, right? If you will, like throughout the year. I think even more so, instead of it even being like, the one annual tour, we're going to do this over 3 days, we'll spread that out. More like finding periods of time where, because I think you're right,
Work
things
is already happening.
right, and that's what we ended up doing. They weren't, even when we did like the tour of the Reach program, right? Or even as people have even when we were doing the work on the feasibility study, like you participating and going on the catwalk and things
Yep.
like that, right? Like, I feel like the work that we're doing with master plan, the work that we'll be doing, the curriculum coordinators are very excited about sharing that work. That if we actually really did just sort of open up and have more of a buffet with more frequent opportunities, knowing that this work is happening. If you're able to come, great. But you're right, if nobody's available that day, that work is still happening.
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to somebody organizing their schedule in order to host you.
Right.
And if only one person can come, then they've made this all, not that one person's not important, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Like, I feel
right,
like
right.
we've got to that point now where you're getting invitations to go and participate in things at schools, right? And I feel like we can develop a little bit longer buffet to say this might be something that somebody's interested in doing, and somebody might literally only have 30 minutes one day,
Right.
But then they might have, an hour the next month to go do something at a different time, and you'll just kind of see when we're inviting folks to join us do the things we're doing.
Catherine has your hands up.
I'm just throwing another idea in there, like you were saying, Dr. Chu, on that buffet. Even maybe consider opening up some of the professional development, that is going on in the district, and this year, and especially with, the restorative practices that we'll be working on in the middle schools, I think could also be worthwhile maybe for some of our school committee members to see. And in that sense, you're kind of joining in something that's already organized, and it's not necessarily putting our staff as well, out in terms of having to massively facilitate us, So I think that also could be worthwhile, because I think obviously as well, the professional development within the district, is such a key component to, the running of our district in terms of, bringing about, various different new practices and stuff. So I think it'd be worthwhile if we could add that.
One other thought that I know came up last year that I want to capture in this discussion was trying to understand some of our traveling staff, like our ELL programs, was where the context for that, but in general, staff that travel between buildings. And then I had a thought, just because I was looking at my notes from our earlier agenda topics, is maybe one of those is timed with lunch, and we could help ring up some kids with their trays. I don't know.
Well, that certainly could be an adventure. Right? You wouldn't be able to actually help hand out
Touch
the food.
food, right.
You're,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I was thinking you were gonna you wanted to enjoy eating your lunch
Oh, yeah,
in a
it's-
large cafeteria.
I just want that moment of coming out with my tray and
Don't
being
know
like,
where to
where am I
sit.
going to sit?
That's right.
I don't know.
Okay,
We can certainly find experiences for you.
so some
Better
great.
understand everybody's.
You could take some MCAS. You want to take MCAS?
Hey, we have a standing invitation from Chris Woolley to
observe
witness-
MCAS, not to take it, that is
observe
true.
MCAS. Great. So a couple good seed ideas that we can
Yeah.
sort of flesh out.
Yeah, I like
Any
those.
other? Okay, great. Zoom participants, great. Okay, so last up is superintendent draft goals, and those should be in the packet from everyone and in your email, I believe.
Yes, I did email them to everybody. and
Great.
Yes, they're in the packet as well, too. So as you can see, we did meet, the Superintendent Evaluation Subcommittee did meet last week. Thank you for that. And we talked about the goals. We talked about the specific indicators as well, too. I had made some adjustments to the indicators so that, for the most part, I'm losing my words. The standards 2, 3, and 4, I chose different indicators to focus on based on what the goals were. Standard 1, I left the data-informed decision-making since it was coming so closely aligned with what your data goal was as well, too. I thought that made a lot of sense. One of the things that I like about these goals and the committee's goals is that they are actually taking parts of the district improvement plan and different people are focusing on aspects of it, because the reality is that no one person is going to do everything in the district improvement plan. So even when I was talking with the teachers about the school improvement plans and then their goals, it's like the idea is to tap into something here. We know as we're assessing it that we're going to make sure that everything's getting taken care of, but whereas you're developing a working group to look at the school start times, we're going to be focusing on the equity audit specifically, and that's something that I know that we'll be doing, and that's why I thought that would be great to have as one of our goals specifically. There was a conversation about for the second goal of trying to assess our progress with the work, with the things that we specifically know that we've got ARPA funding for, right? So that's why we called out specifically the small group support for self-regulation for elementary students and the community building practices and the restorative practices for the middle schools that'll then grow to the academy as well too. I jumped around already, and I apologize for that. My first goal, I am in year 3 of the new superintendent induction program, so it makes sense for that to be the last year that this is on there. It's a little bit different. I'm not going to be working individually with Matt King this year. We work in a cohort. We still do have content days. I do think it's a little bit different this year. One of the things that I talked with the evaluation subcommittee group about is the second standard, management of operations. I'm focusing on fiscal systems. As we know, FY25 is going to be challenging. We know that. There's a lot of work that we're doing already with the budget task force. We've been already looking at FY25. I feel like that aspect on here, that's going to take on a significant amount of time. And so the first goal is not as I don't think it's not as well articulated as year 1 and year 2 were, because it is more about, I'm just going to participate in this program. I am also thinking that any of these goals might adjust. We might talk about the focus shifting, and the reality is I might not be able to make those meetings if I'm having to do something else with the different work that's here in the district. So I want to keep it there as a goal, but that's the reason why I feel like the other 3 goals have more information in them.
Reactions, discussion from the committee?
Catherine does.
I was just going to say, I could see a little hand there. Catherine?
I'm also happy to go last. Yeah, no, I just had a few observations that I wanted to kind of check in with. I was just curious, Dr. Chu, the year 3 of the superintendent induction program, is there a particular focus? I think last year, if I remember correctly, kind of last year's focus was a bit more kind of, diving into data and kind of using more data. And I think that was kind of some of the focus of the program in general. I'm just wondering, is there a similar type of focus or theme for kind of that 3rd year of the program?
I honestly don't know yet. I have not seen it, which is why I didn't specifically articulate what that focus was. Our first meeting is September 21st.
Okay.
And so I could articulate more of what it was, but that was one of the things that I felt like we're not being guided as specifically by our coach as we were in the past. So that's why I didn't include that.
Okay, no, that's perfect. I think just more out of interest. My other kind of observation was, and if everybody wants to cast their memory back to May 8th, 2023, when we adopted a new policy or a revised policy on the goals. Part of that policy, there was 2 kind of aspects of it that we kind of outlined in that policy that Gloria and I had worked a lot on, was trying to add more kind of data and analysis into the superintendent goals, are kind of part of creating the goals. And the second part was kind of specifically calling out success criteria. And I know kind of the benchmarks kind of somewhat aligned to it. Oh, look at that, magically appears. And I'm kind of looking through the goals, and specifically, I suppose, kind of that sense of belonging goal and the kind of equity goal. I kind of feel those 2 in particular really lend themselves to getting a bit more data in terms of, pulling in some, I would have liked to see maybe if we could create like some sort of an appendix or something that attaches to this document in future where we say, oh, our sense of belonging, we could pull some information from like previous panorama um surveys to say this is currently kind of as a reminder, this is kind of why this is becoming the goal for this year. But then also in terms of creating kind of benchmarks, could we consider creating Google Forms or some sort of like anonymous survey, data collection, for example, when we're doing the PD up at the middle school, we're saying we're having middle school students engage in community circles. Maybe we could harvest some sort of information through that or through the staff and doing their PD so that we have a bit more data as well behind how the professional development is being run, received, is there better ways to improve, develop, is it landing the way that we intended it, etc. So I'm just wondering if there's more scope following along from the policy that we just voted on to kind of, improve on how we kind of evaluate the goals.
Those are good points. I will say I did follow the same framework that I had used last year, so I didn't update the word benchmarks with success criteria, but I think your point is well taken. I liked the way that it's articulated, that you did that with the school committee goals. We can look at putting some more of this in here. I think I am more inclined to refer to the data that I think we do have in terms of in how we're sharing it in the school improvement plans and things like that, rather than maybe creating it over again, but I can look to see where we can better articulate that.
Go ahead.
I was just to follow on. I feel like as the one member who's on both the evaluation subcommittee and policy, this slipped by me, and I apologize.
I'm glad you say that though, because I don't feel as bad that it slipped past me.
Yeah, no.
Seeing as how no one on the evaluation committee mentioned
When Catherine
it
told
either,
me, I'm
so.
like, oh, that's right. And I do think that the intent of the success criteria, because we'll notice benchmarks are in the proposed action plans, right? Key actions, timelines, and benchmarks. I think that's more of what we have in there now. I feel like the success criteria, and this might be a longer discussion, so I'm just gonna, say this brief thing is, I think it is meant to take it a little bit farther. Benchmarks tend to be very binary. Success criteria is a little bit more maybe evaluative. And so I think we do have an opportunity to maybe pilot this policy and look at what that might look like for this year's goals. Like, what would the success criteria, how would it be different than the benchmark we already have in there? Maybe it doesn't, maybe it does. But if the evaluation subcommittee and superintendent would be, amenable to taking a look at that, I'd be happy to, from the policy side, to kind of go back into the discussions on this and then bring that to the evaluation subcommittee as some recommendations. Just a thought. Not trying to derail this. I don't think Catherine is either, but I'm glad she caught it, because I did not catch it.
Yeah, no, I have no qualms on the goals themselves at all. I think it's more kind of creating that cohesive approach, and really kind of putting, I also think of for, our families, if they do pick them up and, want to read them, that maybe it's kind of outlined in a clear way that they can also see.
I guess one of my questions would be, and maybe again, it's now having the conversation as we're creating the goals, and then actually we're having this conversation as we were coming to the end of a cycle, as opposed to then being at the beginning of the cycle now too. Is my thought and focus here again was, we just did significant work as a district to develop the strategic district improvement plan, and so these goals are jumping off of that. And the idea of establishing a package that has additional data illustrating the strengths and areas of improvement in relationship to the goals. After we've already established what our focus was, I was looking at this more as, okay, what's the next step after the district improvement plan has been developed to then make sure that that is moving forward and in action, not necessarily identifying maybe new areas of improvement that we haven't already considered, which is the way that I was thinking through it. I'm not disagreeing with what you said, Catherine. I'm just saying that was the way that I was thinking through preparing this was, okay, we've now our guiding document is the district improvement plan. And so therefore, I will be developing goals, knowing that also this year, one of the things we talked about is that there will be an annual update on the district improvement plan. And
As opposed to like digging through data to find things
Right.
to work on.
And where am I, at what point are these goals separate from that, which is then it's a whole other thing that's happening outside of, and that I think is something that we'll have to kind of wrestle with.
Yeah, it's interesting to read this, thinking about how it builds on the STIP.
Right.
Yeah.
Without something like that,
Yeah.
then this totally is like, this is what you're developing. But now that we've created something that we specifically decided was cohesive,
Right.
and we didn't have a 10-page document.
And I guess I don't read it necessarily as like like this appendix or this big package. I kind of read that a little bit as like the school improvement plans, how they have
Yeah.
like sort of that preamble that talks about here's our data to give you an idea of, our makeup sort of, right? But
And so then my question would be, if that's what this should be, then I would say, why would we be doing a annual district update, which I think will look like the school improvement plans?
oh, sorry, I'm
Because I agree with you, you know what I'm saying? Like, because then I'm thinking like, a lot of that information would be the exact same. Some of it would be different, because some of the, again, just me participating in the superintendent piece, which I think we've agreed is now just a process that I'm in, and then that will not be one of the goals next year, right? But that would be something that I'm just genuinely puzzling through at this moment in time, that maybe those two things are one, and they're not two separate things.
Right.
What, just for my own, to figure this out process-wise, what was the timeline, what was your intent for the timeline of that year one?
So when we had talked about it, what we had talked about was that would come before the school improvement plans. Like this year, like last year, the
like
district improvement plan took place, which then led to the school improvement plans. And so then we said, that's a really great process, right? So that then the update on the district should take place before the school improvement plans take place in the spring, knowing that then in year 4, as we do that last one, it would really be the development of a new STIP, was sort of the cycle that we had talked about.
And I do feel like the analyses section of this could just become implicit in the process, right?
Right.
Like you said, it could be that it has fallen out of the work we've done and out of the school improvement plans. And it may also mean that there are opportunities within the goals just to cite, to reference that, like, we know that we are working on this. We know that we're not done with this work. And if there's data to reference there, all the better. But again, it might just refer back to school improvement plans, STIPs, things like that. So I think we'll I think we should keep thinking about what that might look like and how that fits in.
Right.
Yeah, and just to back up, I was proposing more that we look at the success criteria and see if there's just something we want to do there, but the analyses, maybe open it up to, if anybody has ideas on what that looks like, then we can keep thinking about that.
I agree with you. I'm less hung up on analyses, and I feel like this is a good learning year for how these interact, and we do know that the evaluation and the goal process has been evolving over the last couple of years. But I do think that success criteria, at least, as whether it's something articulated in black and white in September, and as challenging as that might be to really put words around, I think could really help us when I think about May and June, when we're
Right.
sitting down with your rubric. So it is a nice push to try and really, even though it's kind of challenging now to think about what it is, I think it could really help in the spring.
Like,
Yeah.
holistically, look at the student learning goal, right? I'm talking about using this funding for building in some of that PD at the middle school and elementary school levels. How would that affect student learning, right? The advantages of those trainings happening for staff would trickle down to the students, would lead to more increased results. You know, seeing some of that data condensed down a little bit after a year, just I think would be really informative for the committee to see. And, you know, whether it's a tour that's coupled with that, you know, what's that sort of work looking like? And how is that translating? I think that's, you know, just some of those criterions would be helpful.
And I think some of it is hard, especially because number 2 is a little bit more culture,
Right.
right? So like, we know that like 6-8 months,
Yeah, I mean, that
you know,
could be a
it's
multi-year,
challenging.
right,
Yeah, right.
Right.
work on this, but, you know,
We don't want to create a success criteria that
Yeah.
is impossible either.
Right.
But I guess that was another piece though, like when because that is a conversation that we had in the subcommittee.
Right.
And so that's when I added the benchmark that the middle school students will engage in the circles during advisory. So by the end of the year, they will have done that. That's a success.
Yep.
Yeah.
We don't know the actual long-term outcome, right? We can guess and we know why we're doing it, just like the idea that that there will be teachers from WA who will participate and a plan will be developed this year as to how that will roll out in the future. I saw those as benchmarks and success criteria kind of at the same time, I guess.
Oh, Catherine?
I think something just specifically talking about, you know, that PD at the middle school is, you know, your success criteria. You could look at it as by the end of this initial first year of this PD, do all staff and or students know and understand what restorative practices is or looks like? Because right now we kind of, you know, in various conversations we've had with a variety of people, not everyone has the same understanding of what that looks like. So I think when you think about, well, what's the success of this? Does everyone at least understand after this first leg or phase of this professional development, are we all at least now on the same kind of page and understanding what it is? And how do you get that data? I'm assuming it's through conversations with students, or again, like a Google form or something that they can fill out, or just conversations with staff. So there's definitely ways to kind of quantify and kind of look at what that success criteria could be. It doesn't have to be a big all-encompassing goal. You can kind of break it down, you know, on okay, what is the main kind of points of this? Like the practice won't be embedded after a year. I mean,
Right.
No practices are completely embedded, but at least does everybody understand what we're trying to achieve?
See, you bring up a good point there, Catherine, because I like what you're saying. What I'm hearing from you, though, is actually just a different articulated SMART goal, right? Which is not like, so then that's when I start to ask the question how, because you're right, that's the success criteria, but these goals are all intended to be SMART goals in the first place so that they are time bound, so they start with by June 2024. They're a little bit, they're not as specific as what you just said, but they are. So I guess I need to look to say, are they measurable are the goals themselves measurable to the extent that the committee is comfortable? Are they realistic? Are they actionable? Are they time bound? You know what I'm saying? And are they specific? But because what I heard you just say, Catherine, which could be a success measure, could also just be another goal.
Right.
Right? And or the other thing that I'm also thinking about is that in some ways, some of the goals have to be a little bit more broad because of the position, knowing that a goal that a teacher might have is going to be even more specific based on the actual specific students in their class list. So I want to balance that to figure out how am I capturing what you're saying? How is this about us? I actually struggled with this because this was more specific than some of the other goals in the past, and it was focusing really a little bit more on a group of students versus all students. But I think that's okay.
I would argue that that may help actually whittle down a group that you could select more, whether it's
Right.
happiness, wellness data, like that might actually make it a little, and again, however that looks like, but I think, some of those, and again, we're talking multi-year efforts and some of these things that aren't going to be encompassed or achieved within an annual goal. But I think they're also just good measures that we should be thinking about as a committee and as an administration about the wellness of our students, about the happiness, the culture that we're building through the STIP, through our mission and values, and I mean, just I think an end of the year survey, could be achieved, and I'd be more than happy to. Yeah.
And I think for the success criteria, I mean, they serve a couple of purposes. One is to, on one hand, you would love to measure the sense of belonging of our students, and we do that with Panorama, but we've acknowledged that that's a longer timeline than we're going to have for this one-year goal. We're not going to see Panorama results reflecting the work going in this year right away. But I also think just for the committee, some of the success criteria are just also a way, I think, for us to have something tangible to say, we think this happened with fidelity. How do we know it happened with fidelity? In some cases, it's just something that it's going to be hard to get to. But I think these goals are pretty concrete. Even though their goals are a little bit less concrete, the aims, the eventual aims are less concrete. The goals themselves are pretty concrete. So and that's why I think I mentioned too, anywhere we can just have communication. Anytime that somebody can come talk about the equity audit, and we'll do that. We'll have updates on the equity audit. We'll have updates on restorative practice, professional development. I think that's the kind of thing that will help a lot as we get mid-year and later to get those updates on things, on these particular goals. I think that'll work well.
Right. I guess to be redundant, the work on success criteria is sort of selfish or because it's the output just helps us in the spring with the evaluation, right? Like to be able to put something around that. So
am I being asked to develop specific success criteria, different success criteria at this moment in time? Because I do want to throw out there that one thing that I think we've been successful at this moment in time is it's August 28th.
Yeah.
And we're talking about these goals.
Yeah.
And the memo that I looked at to reference the format that I used last year was September 28th.
Yeah.
So we're a month ahead of schedule.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to circle back because I thought you offered something tangible.
I was going to suggest that in the next 4 weeks, the subcommittee get together and see if we have any suggestions for success criteria or tweaks or whatever. I think we maybe would have wanted to do that anyway, and then we bring this back, not the next meeting, but the last meeting in September.
Okay.
With whatever revisions there may or may not be based on that meeting.
So that would be.
That just gives us some time, so we don't have to do it in the next
26th.
week.
26th. There's a holiday on the 25th, so 9/26. We have consensus around that path. Sounds good to everybody?
It's fine. And it gives the subcommittee one more chance to kind of meet with the superintendent and make sure that we're all on the same page.
And if anyone, I would say even outside of the subcommittee, Catherine, Mari, Bill, Chris, if anyone has specific wordings that they would like to see, you could send directly to Dr. Chu.
Yep.
So he can incorporate those into his edits and that discussion.
And I would just say that, even though we're asking for edits to be made, I appreciate all the thoughtfulness that went into what's here, and clearly the fact that we're having this discussion in August is tremendous. So.
To back to the goals themselves, right? Like we've talked a lot about
Right.
but I mean, I didn't say this, but I when I read them, I had that sense of, those are the ones, right? Those are the right ones based on where we're at now and based on that step. So I was really pleased with them as well.
Great.
Good discussion. We're going to move on to personnel update.
Okay.
You have 2 minutes.
I know.
Make it last longer. No, after what she said this afternoon, we are not.
He's trying to
finishing on time.
sabotage the timeline.
I have a lot of
Well,
questions.
it is lengthy because it's the summer.
Yeah.
right? So there's a lot on here. Unless you have specific questions about it, I didn't have anything specific that I was going to say about it.
Hurry up before Chris pulls it up.
Right?
Nah.
And I will say, yeah, so,
And obviously, hiring is so fluid and challenging,
Yep.
but we have sort of classes all
Yep.
set,
Yep.
coverage good
Yep.
for the first day.
yeah.
Great. Okay, I've bought you as much time as possible.
Although we are talking about staffing, is there still, the district's always looking for day substitutes,
Yep,
correct?
we're always happy to increase our list for
Substitute pool.
subs. We always need substitute nurses. Like I mentioned earlier, I don't think we have the list of substitute custodians that I think we would like to have. One of the things I know that's something even we can kind of remind our even our student population with, in terms of we actually every year we end up working with some great students over the summer, helping in various ways, whether it's with facilities, whether it's with technology. And so if students are, whether they're recent grads or they find themselves having time during a break, their assistance might be helpful, so I would encourage them to reach out.
Great. Anything else from committee members? I don't see hands on Zoom. Okay, great.
Motion to adjourn?
Thank you.
Second.
All those in favor, Mari?
Aye.
Catherine?
Aye.
Oh, 9/11. Bill?
Aye.
Sean? Chris?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. Thank you.